Welcome back to Media7. Newspapers' migration online has often been a raging success in readership terms, less often for the bottom line or for the fortunes of individual journalists. In this week's Source, Sam Mulgrew offers the industry some tough love.
United States newspaper circulations have fallen to 1950s levels. Yes, cutting down trees for newspapers has become a great way to lose money. Editors are desperately seeking eyeballs by getting lots of trashy stories into Section A and sending readers to their websites. It's not really working. A Pew Research study shows for every $1 gained in digital growth, $7 is lost in print. While this tool takes over the world. Google makes more money than the entire US newspaper industry. Back here, the National Business Review hasn't fallen into the trap of giving everything freely away online, like an increasing number of Rupert Murdoch's papers. The privately owned NBR has a paywall. And now, in an attempt to modernise the journalism model, it's taking a page out of a Victorian history book. It's asking scribes to send copy in, and provided it's published at all, payment is calculated on page views, from $50 to $350. It rings of 1820s newspapers where penny-a-liners, the first freelancers, ran around London furiously smoking, drinking and writing copy. Reporting a 19th century kind of sex, drugs and rock and roll, making it as sensationalist as possible to sell more copy. Some things never change.
Well, with me now is Barry Colman, the publisher of NBR. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you.
Now, before we start anything else, you've been having some discussions with the New Zealand Herald today, and they have not been entirely cordial.
They've been very cordial, but they've been very polite. We've had a really interesting situation develop today, and it affects our whole business model. Because our business model is that if we find stories no one else has, we charge people to read them. So we're behind the paywall. And we had a classic case today where one of our reporters, Rod Vaughan, interviewed Sir Doug Graham, and he got the man to talk and cry and give us his whole story and the massive ordeal he had been through. It was very, very hot copy, fantastic quotes in it. So we positioned that behind the paywall, and a few hours later it was plundered first by the Herald site, all the key material out of it, and then a few hours later by Stuff. So we've got a real interesting copyright and legal issue here, and because if we can't own our material that our journalists write exclusively for us, and we have the right to sell it.
Well, I'm wondering whether Simon Wilson at Metro might be feeling the same, because the Herald this week has done the same thing with their Millie Elder scoop as well.
Yeah. I had a discussion with their head of online, and he said his opinion was that they were inside the Copyright Act. So I can't see how you can take the intellectual property of another paper, if it's behind a paywall, and then suddenly spread it all over your own site, because it was a fantastic story. I can see why the temptation would be there. So I think that what we're facing now is that we're going to have to get a legal opinion on this, and maybe it has to be a test case, because our business model would collapse if every time we get a good story that other people haven't got, it would be just plundered and lost to us.
So was this one of the stories under this new model you've got?
No.
No.
No,
Rod Vaughan's working for you.
Yeah. So yes, the new model you were talking about, the nice Victorian one, it's really only been floated in the last few days, and there seems to be some incredible misconceptions about it.
What are the misconceptions about it?
Well, there seemed to be that there's some catch to it, and we'll be back to Victorian times, as that clip said, and everyone will be working for a cent a day sort of thing. So it's nothing like that at all. Our reason for introducing it was that we think there are really skilled professional freelancers out there who are writing for quite niche publications who come across business stories, and we think that there's a huge potential out there for professional writers who come across business stories to sell them. And this is very transparent.
$50 a story though, Barry?
No. But for a start, nothing goes up unless the chief reporter agrees to it. So professional freelancers, in effect, the ones who have been in touch with us, they phone the chief reporter and they say, I've got a story on this, and immediately the chief reporter says, no, we wouldn't be interested in that, then that's not the sort of thing our readers would be interested in. But if he takes it, then there's a guaranteed payment of $50. So it doesn't have to get to 2 million in terms of hit rate if it's reader rated to be successful, to get to $350. And remember, under the new system of the internet or the web, you don't have to write long stories. So instead of getting paid 40 cents a word under the usual freelance thing that New Zealand has, this doesn't take into account the length of the copy at all. All it's interested in is, will the business audience read it? So that's the key qualifier.
So the trick would be to write short stories that attract a lot of attention.
Absolutely, and that's what we want.
Do they have to be business stories? Because, I mean, stories about surfing dogs are always quite big on the internet. They get a lot, they get a lot of page views. I mean, this is, I think, is genuinely something people have been worried about, though, is that it will be attention-grabbing rather than substantial stories.
No, it won't be. No, it won't be, simply because it has to go through the chief reporter to even get up. So there's no chance of it being sensational in those terms and being inaccurate. It just can't happen. And of course the great thing I would think about it, if I was on the other side of the table and as a freelancer, is that it's totally transparent, because the meter shows directly how many people have clicked the story. Well,
let's say it gets to 800. What proportion of your subscriber base would that represent? Because you're not talking about the entire population of the internet to get your 800 page views, are you? You're talking about however many subscribers you've got.
Yes, well, no, that's if it goes behind the paywall. Most,
not all of them will.
No. We've got about 40% behind the paywall, and as you mentioned earlier, we've got to try and keep it there, because if the Herald keeps and the staff keep plundering it and taking it off us, then we'll have nothing behind the paywall. So these things could rate quite highly, because if they're just free, the uptake is much greater.
It does strike me that this is going to reward people who work their own stories on Twitter and Facebook. Do you see that being a key to it? Because a story can go up there, it can be a great story and not that many people read it, but if I've got 7,000 followers on Twitter, then I can probably herd them there to that story and get me paid.
Yeah.
Is this a problem with the model?
How you'd get around that is by making it subscriber paid. But remember, it won't even get up there unless it's a proper business story. So the onus is on the writer if he's got a good story. Our onus is, does it qualify for our senior business audience? And if we think it's a chance of doing it, then they write the story. So they don't even have to write anything until they find out. So it's not like you send in copy and throw it against the wall.
Pitch the story to the chief reporter, Jock Anderson, write the story, send it in, and see how many hits it gets.
Yeah. It's quite risk-free and it's very transparent.
Well, I can see how I could make that work for me, not just, say, via social media, but I can get my mate who's a computer programmer to knock up a script that loads the page 800 times. Have you got any way around that?
No, we haven't. If someone wants to abuse it, if you have that happen, we know what good stories are rating. And so if you have one that suddenly has 10,000, you know there's a scam on. So you just wouldn't take any more copy off that person. So it's just a common sense, it's a trust thing. So you're dealing only with professional journalists. Tom, Dick and Harry can't come off the street and submit a story. It has to be done professionally. So
I presume this is of the nature of a trial at the moment. What does it have to do to become a permanent feature of the way you work?
I just think it'll become self-evident. I mean, it might not work at all. We're just having a shot. We like to do new things, And so this, someone came up with this idea, and it wasn't me, so it immediately got ruled out. Being stupid. And after I thought about it for a while, I thought maybe it could be my idea, because it seems to me that there's a lot of people out there who are really skilled writers who've got nowhere to put stuff. So this is all just added money as far as they're concerned. On our side of it, if it's too successful, we go broke. So I mean, we have to keep an eye on this. But I think it's a great opportunity for freelancers.
Right, own the good ideas, Barry. Thank you, Barry Colman. Now, although TV News apparently didn't rate it, the death this week of Sir Paul Callaghan has been seen by many New Zealanders as a great loss. Sarah Daniel surveys his legacy.
He was the rebel who once blew up rocks with Molotov cocktails. Sir Paul Callaghan would graduate from rebellion in Wanganui to being a world-class physicist whose list of honours and achievements exceed any space we have here. He was a scientist, philosopher and innovator who could see the big picture. He talked about the environment, business, social development, and in this presentation in his last year, he amped up the rhetoric on how we need to prosper as a nation.
I'm not interested in 60 billion one-off at the cost of all we hold dear. I want 40 billion a year, sustainably, for the future, in a way that doesn't damage all that's important to this country and why we love it and where we want to be.
But most of all, he was an extraordinary communicator and leader. He engaged with media and their audiences in a way that is rare in the world of science.
But I want to finish with just this challenge to you. We do not have visionary leadership on the centre-left or centre-right of this country. We need it in depth. And Lao Tzu says about leadership, the worst leaders we hate, the next best we fear, the next best we honour and praise, but the best leaders are the ones we don't even notice they're there because we are getting on and doing it ourselves. That is the challenge for leadership. That's the challenge I put to you here.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks to Vaughan Davis, Sam Wicks and Barry Colman, and again to Sir Paul Callaghan for a life's work. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.